afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Arjan, and I'm the host for today's session. The presentation today is delivered by Steve White of Kepner-Tregoe. Steve is a senior consultant in Kepner-Tregoe, and we've been working for about a year now together on a Kepner-Tregoe ITpreneurs offering. Kepner-Tregoe is referred to in ITIL in the service operations books for years. And a lot of people in our courses ask about the methodology and also on the relationships between Kepner-Tregoe and ITIL. Thus, I've asked Steve to deliver this presentation, and that's what Steve's going to elaborate on for the next 30 minutes or so. If you have any questions, please write them in the question box. We'll hold all the questions until the end, or if there are any questions that Steve can answer immediately, he'll make sure to answer them. Steve, the floor is all yours.
Arjan, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. Yes, I'm Steve White from Kepner-Tregoe, and a very brief history. I worked from school. My first job was at Sun Microsystems. I was there for 17 years, and for the last 10 of them, I was in some way involved in the deployment of KT thinking processes in the support organization. And at the end of my time with Sun, I looked around at other things that I wanted to do, and I liked Kepner-Tregoe's thought processes so much, I joined KT. So the purpose of this transfer of information or communication is in the title, how to talk about Kepner-Tregoe as a methodology for problem analysis when you're delivering ITIL courses. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll have slightly more of an understanding of what the KT process is, and arguably how to talk about it. And I'm going to start in a place that you might not expect me to start, which is around the way individuals think. If we take a group of engineers and managers, in fact, if you take any group of individuals, they all think differently. Now, arguably, if you work for a particular organization, there is neurological evidence to suggest that you, over a period of time, begin to take on the neurological structures that are prevalent in that organization. So if you are in Goldman Sachs for a long time, you will have a brain that looks roughly like a Goldman Sachs brain, or a Barclays brain, or a British Steel brain. However, when we get down to it, people generally approach the world in slightly different ways. And this is completely fine if individuals are handling individual problems. So, for instance, in the tightly scripted world of a high volume, low value service desk environment, the different ways that individuals think are kind of leveled by the scripts that they're forced to use. And scripting is really just a way of getting people to think in roughly the same direction. But individual, let's say, blacksmith handling individual problems, individual forges, they'll solve problems in different ways, and that would be completely fine. But in the world of IT support, this is not completely fine, because individuals approaching a single issue with lots of different ways of approaching the issue can cause difficulty. Now, I am here going to separate the required need for creativity, which is essential when we're solving problems, from discussions around the process that we'll use to approach the problem solving that we're going to do on a particular day. And so I assert that the individual ways that the individual people approach the solving of problems causes extended fixed times. When there's more than one person involved, it becomes even worse. In fact, the more people who are involved who have not already agreed a troubleshooting method, the more amplification there is of this effect. And I have some hard evidence to prove it. This is a piece of analysis from an organization, and we looked at the time to solver. In this instance, it was the mean time to get to the person who solved the issue, which goes up the vertical axis, and the number of owners, which is on the horizontal axis. And this particular metric, mean time to solve versus number of people involved, is an incredibly interesting metric for analyzing the burden of additional people in solving a problem. And so here we can see that linear to 16 people in the team, every person in additional added to the team took on average an additional 14 days to time to solve. Now, it might be that you consider that to be acceptable. What we looked at when we looked at the quality of the work that was going on inside some of those tickets, which had a lot of people involved, is that on many occasions, the engineers had simply started again. And the reason that they'd started again was because they didn't understand the documentation of the previous people working on this issue. And the reason they didn't understand the documentation was because everybody was using a different troubleshooting approach. And so, if we're going to settle on a troubleshooting approach, we might as well settle on one that has been proven over many years and has stayed the test of time, and that is the Kepner-Tregoe process. Perfectly reasonably, you can ask, why is it that the KT process is mentioned in ITIL at all? Because it's almost the only proprietary process in all of ITIL. And I honestly don't know the answer. 21 years ago, when ITIL version 1 was being written, I do know that Digital and HP and IBM, I'm told, were involved in the writing of it, and Digital and HP were institutional users of the KT process at that time and used it to minimize time and maximize value to their clients and to the organization. So one could say, well, why do we use Kepner-Tregoe? Well, entertainingly also, and I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the origins of KT, which is a video that's available on YouTube, you'll see that we came from an incident management environment where the management of the incident, either well or poorly, might change the course of the individual's life because it was framed in a military environment. So we've got situation appraisal, problem analysis, decision analysis, and potential problem analysis as the four big questions, four big processes that we use inside the KT clear thinking processes. The goal of the deployment of good quality troubleshooting is flow, so that individuals know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it is to be done. And interestingly, I'll argue that ITIL is about what to do and why they're doing it, and the space is left beneath the ITIL process to figure out how it is to be done. And one of the answers that's suggested in ITIL is the KT process. So let's take a look a bit further in more detail at each of these processes. Situation appraisal is used to clarify and prioritize a situation, and it happens extremely quickly for most of the time in service desk and problem and incident management environments, but sometimes it's very useful to have a structured process if something particularly gnarly or difficult comes in. Those incoming incidents where we need to find some of the root cause in order to find to restore service, and for problem management when we need to find the root cause in order to build IT infrastructure stability, we'll use the process called problem analysis. It's there to find the root cause or root causes of an issue, and at some point we'll know what's wrong, and we may have a choice about what we're going to do about it. And decision analysis is the process which allows us to have the conversation, maybe at very high speed, but have the conversation about what we should do to properly restore the service or to properly provide IT stability for the service. So either an incident or problem management. Everything that we've done so far is leading towards a change, and the potential problem analysis process is a really good way of ensuring that the right thinking has occurred before we make the change. And it's generally well understood, a vast percentage of incoming incidents, or an ugly percentage of incoming incidents, are generated through a change that's gone wrong. So it's worth considering before we make that change what potential problems might exist, so we can take preventive actions and also plan contingent actions. It is recommended as the best practice, and the KT fundamental clear thinking processes sit underneath the ITIL definitions and the ITIL processes. Now, this really does help in the marketing of KT and the deployment of KT processes, because if you are dealing with a client who doesn't abide by ITIL but wants to improve their service operation and has, for whatever reasons, decided that ITIL is not for them, the KT processes still also work and work well. So the good news is these fundamental thinking processes work whether ITIL is being used or not. It makes almost no difference to the outcome, because we're working at the brain thinking process level rather than the hitching it to a existing process level. However, as we'll see in a moment, I've done some mapping and we can take a look at more detail at that. In the context of incident management and problem management, it's best to use the right tool. So when a customer issue comes in, the first process, and always the first process, is situation appraisal. That helps us understand what the concerns are, what the priority of the concerns are, what needs to be done, and who needs to do it. And if we are working on an incident, then we are working on the effect of the problem rather than the cause. We're working on potential workarounds, and we may well go situation appraisal. We now are working on an incident. What do we need to do to restore service, which is a question, and we may well be that the decision analysis part of the process, operated very quickly, is the right framework to frame the conversation. If, however, we now know that the service has been restored and we want to work on the cause of the problem, then we are going to pay attention to finding the root cause using problem analysis. It's therefore important that we use the right tool, and one of the most important steps in situation appraisal is the step called plan next steps. What are we going to do with each of the incoming issues and concerns that are coming in to the service desk or the incident management group or the problem management group? Adoption is an important part of the success of a deployment of KT, because arguably the meaning of a 2-day training course is either the opportunity to skive from the office and enjoy some nice hotel food, or it is business results. And so we have a belief that quality times adoption equals results. The quality is in the process skill transfer. It's the process itself, it's the skill transfer that is being used to communicate that process to the new brains that are being infected with good quality, clear thinking processes. It's effectively the training. The adoption is around getting people to use the process. And for those who are on this call who haven't seen what Thomas Pfeiffer is doing with the KT process, what he's done is put the 2-day workshop at the front end of a series of events that will help people to deploy the process in their environment with a series of coaching activities. And then one can go a little bit further with the alignment of processes and triggers, as in under what circumstances are you going to use situation appraisal, and under what circumstances are you going to stop using good quality consistent troubleshooting because you now no longer need the processes. And arguably, you fall out of the KT process when you don't need it anymore. Expectations, consequences, and feedback is part of the performance system so that people are encouraged to use good quality thinking processes. The measurement of the success or otherwise of the deployment, the documentation that is being created as a result of higher quality questions being asked and answers being written down, and knowledge creation. And then the leadership. If we are going to deploy good quality troubleshooting into a support organization, it is not just the individuals who are processing calls that can demonstrate clear thinking. The management, the team leaders, and the supervisors can all use exactly the same processes to provide experience, leadership, and an understanding that good quality thinking processes are not just for the end user engineers. And then we get the results in terms of resolution, restoration, cost per incident, customer satisfaction. And arguably, the investment in time in terms of the attendance of the workshop and the investment in time in terms of the creation of the quality materials plus the adoption should be a cost benefit in terms of the results that can be pointed to. I have no idea why I've done that. Scroll back. I pushed the button once and it screamed forwards. So, the purpose of the KD Foundation course is a multiple reason. It certainly trains individuals in the industry best practice for problem management, and it's recommended by the official ITIL core publications. It certainly certifies the individuals through the examination as KT Foundation certified, and it absolutely introduces critical techniques to work on incidents, problems, and indeed service desk. The purpose for the KT Foundation course is also to provide a full competence development path, and we're going to take a look at that a little bit later towards the end of this. It is to associate your brand, your business brand, with a powerful and well-recognized brand, because you can hitch onto the fact that Kepner-Tregoe is mentioned in ITIL, and it clearly expands your portfolio of products that you can touch your customers with. The 4 building blocks to an implementation include the bit that is part of the training course, the skill development and KT process. And we touched on those other things earlier. The on-job coaching is important as well. The process integration, so that the tools and the environment support clear thinking, and the performance system integration to make sure that the work environment is a work environment that sets the expectations clearly, that sets the measures up, that ensures that the consequences and the feedback are in alignment with the goals of the implementation project. There are some places where the KT process works really well. Where there is a high cost of success or failure associated with the resolution of an issue is one of the places where KT works particularly well. So, for instance, financial services, healthcare, telecoms are all places where they understand very clearly how much downtime costs them. Where there is a complex organization with many stakeholders, so it's a place where the incident management or problem management are located in many different geographic locations, so they're not all together in one place. There may be many complex stakeholders from the business. Again, KT works very well. The place where it doesn't work quite so well and this is just because the world has created scripting and so on, is in the place where there's a high volume, low cost, low value ticket environment. So you're going to enjoy less success generally with talking to service desk people who have 700 people working on a service desk, handling calls that on average take less than 60 seconds each. And the staff are easily swappable for other staff directly from the job pool. Whereas where you've got people who have a great deal of experience, there's a high cost of failure, there's a great deal of pressure involved, and the complexity of the environment is high, that's a place where the deployment of clear thinking, good quality processes works particularly nicely. When looking at service strategy, generally the best service strategies that we see maximize the customer lifetime value of the customer, be that an internal customer, as in inside a bank, the only customer is the business of the bank, or an external support organization where they have real customers. The service strategy should be maximizing customer lifetime value. That should be the #1 objective. And within that, typically, there are only 2 levers that can be pulled. One is increasing service revenue. So if you are talking to an organization which is looking to increase service revenue, pay attention to the effectiveness that the KT processes bring to an organization. If, however, you're talking to somebody who is looking to reduce service cost, then pay attention to process efficiency. KT works both on the effectiveness and the efficiency of support organizations. And it's worthwhile knowing whether the objectives are reducing service cost or increasing service revenue. So how KT is typically used in service desk, and of course this goes against what I just said, that typically high volume, low value service desks are not a place to play. But there are some service desks where there are a small number of highly skilled and highly technical staff who are taking a low volume of calls and they are handling them excellently. Some of my customers have got a small service desk and they have no target time for how long they should keep hold of a particular incoming issue. They only have a target on how many calls there are in the queue. So if somebody phones in when they're busy, they're going to have to handle it quickly and pass it on to a resolution team. But if it's a quiet period, they can spend all their time working on increasing the knowledge of the IT organization by solving issues. And so, incoming incident comes in, they're going to record the basic details. Is it a request? Yes, it is. Follow specific procedures. If not, they're going to interrogate the CMDB and so on. That bit in purple down that side, that's straight pretty much précis out of the ITIL book. But what the KT process does is it provides a framework. So if you are interrogating the CMDB, use the bit of the KT process out of problem analysis called object and defect. If you are defining the priority and assessing the incident details, then use the chunks from situation appraisal. If you are going to assign the issue to someone else, consider the questions in plan involvement. And when you're closing it, using situation appraisal to document and close. If you're working in the incident management environment, again down the center of the screen, we have a slightly reduced version of the ITIL incident management process. And this is how the KT process maps to it. So situation appraisal handles that top bit. Then there's an initial diagnosis. We have something called problem analysis quick spec that will help with that. Within the more resources required or get more resources, that's something which we're asking using questioning skills and more PA quick spec. The investigation and diagnosis may use bits of the quick spec, but it may also use full problem analysis. And then we have some questions around, do I have enough information to resolve the incident? Is the root cause required? Are multiple solutions available? These are all questions, and we can use the decision analysis framework. We can use DA, potential problem analysis, and then we can stand the resources down. So there's a mapping between the ITIL process and the KT process. Again, in problem management, there we have it's a simplified version of the problem management process from ITIL, and we've got there the mapping again. Which bits of the KT process will work particularly well when handling problems. Oddly enough, it hasn't come out in terms of the amount of process use that's involved, but in problem management, the focus is on that box that says find true cause. It's a little box, it's a really clever process, and it's the thing that is the engine that drives the KT part of the how in problem management. Now, obviously, there's a great deal of content in these 3 slides, and I've just talked through them quickly, but you'll get a copy of these later. Briefly, call comes in. We're always going to do situation appraisal. Is the functionality down? Do we need to provide a workaround? If the functionality is down, there's the DA. Decide on the best workaround, plan the workaround, and use PPA to protect the plan. If it's not, then it's a problem, or if it's not a problem, we can take action. If it's a problem, here we're expanding that little red box, the previous slide. Problem statement. Use the problem statement. Can we get away without using the rest of problem analysis? If we can, hurrah. Otherwise, 15 minutes back. Does the knowledge find cause? Can we get away with using full PA? If not, full PA process. So this is the start of a journey that ends with self-sufficiency. The way KT operates is that we like to pass our intellectual property to our customers for financial remuneration because we are of value, and then they are set up to do this work for themselves. So we're starting off with the foundation, the KT foundation, which is at a level with the ITIL foundation. So do I ensure everyone understands? How do I ensure everyone understands ITIL? ITIL foundation. How do I understand everyone understands the clear thinking processes that underpin it? KT foundation. And then there are additional offerings from KT that will build upon that portfolio that will indeed end in self-sufficiency. It's important that coaching is somehow involved, and so that work that Thomas has done to bulk coaching onto the end of the intervention is absolutely critical to adding value to the people going through the foundation. To take the foundation, and that's a very lovely workshop, and it's an introduction, but if you are going to add value to their lives, then building some kind of on-the-job coaching as a comet trail after the head is a really smart move. And this is what the overall roadmap looks like. And this is pretty much the last slide I'm going to talk about, because the other 2 slides have got so much stuff on them that I'm going to show them to you, and you can read them at your leisure. So we start at the bottom with the KT Foundation course. They then take the KT Foundation exam. It's the first line. It's the first level, and they know how the KT process works. Then, to know and apply it, we've got the problem management extension, which goes very deeply into problem analysis, and we've got the incident management extension that goes very deeply into the rapid use of the KT processes in an incident management environment. And then as the career moves and as deployment is deepened in the organization, there's KT trainers for both problem management and incident management, and the deployment of process coaches and facilitator, KT process facilitators as well. And so these next 2 slides, I'm just going to show you them. This is about the KT Foundation course. There's a lot of words there. The KT Incident Management Extension, as I just mentioned, is all about rapid use of all the processes. KT Problem Management Extension is all about deep and confident use of the problem analysis process. Then we can develop process coaches who can coach other people, and we can develop facilitators who can help facilitate the process. And in KT terms, the difference between coaches and facilitators: coaches need a result through other people. Facilitators need a result through their personal mastery of clear thinking processes. And then there's a track for KT trainers so that inside client organizations, they can deliver these training courses to their staff. So as promised, oh no, there's KT Resolve and KT Restore. Forgot this one. I do apologize. KT Resolve is the KT internal name for the deployment of all those 4 blocks that you saw earlier. The training, the coaching, the performance system, and the process integration. KT Resolve is the full consulting intervention for problem managers. KT Restore is the full consulting intervention for incident management. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we get to the questions. What questions do you have? And I'm pretty much going to hand over to Aryan now to manage this section of the webinar.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the presentation so far. So this so far has been quite an introduction to Kepner-Tregoe and how it aligns to ITIL. So ITIL as the what and KT as the how. Now it's time for questions. I haven't received any questions in the interim. So if you still have any questions now for Steve about the Kepner-Tregoe process, about some of the slides that Steve presented, please write them down in the question box, and I'm happy to. Steve is happy to answer them, hopefully. So one question came in, Steve, from a user saying, would you advise to provide the KT course immediately after the ITIL Foundation course?
And that depends upon what your objectives are. Because if, and it also depends on what the objectives of the foundation course were. So if the objectives of the foundation course were that then they were going to go off and do other things with the ITIL Foundation or the ITIL framework, then it might be that you let ITIL bed in fully, and then they'll have the deep questions about, okay, well, ITIL is an interesting framework, what next? Well, that was the what and the why, and for problem and incident management, here's the how. Or you could bundle them in terms of, here's the foundation for ITIL for 2 days, and if you are an incident or a problem manager, or any of those other roles inside the organization, then here is a fantastic introduction to the clear thinking that will benefit you whatever you further do. So I realize that's a bit of a consultancy answer. It depends on what your objectives are, but I do think it depends on what your objectives are. Thank you for that question.
And thank you for the answer, Steve. Any other questions from anybody? There's a second question. How can one become a trainer for the Kepner-Tregoe Foundation course?
I'm going to leave that to you, Aryan.
That's for me. So the ITpreneurs in Kepner-Tregoe have formed a partnership about a year ago, and under the partnership, ITpreneurs partners are able to deliver the Kepner-Tregoe Foundation course to their customers. And as part of this this arrangement, also there's a full trainer-trainer program that prepares trainers for delivering the KT Foundation course. It's quite an extensive program. It really is a tough and challenging program. I was able to sit in on a couple of the days of the workshop, and it's a mind-boggling experience. Really, it's something fantastic to undergo. If you would like to know more about the process to become a trainer, please drop me an email, and I'm happy to explain in further detail what it means. There's one more question. Steve, there's a question from one of the users stating, a lot of engineers struggle with ITIL concepts as this goes to another level of depth. How much of the foundation is practical, example driven?
I took the ITIL Foundation workshop myself. I took version 2, and then I went for conversion to version 3. And I feel in a good position to answer that question but in answering this question, I think it's really important that you understand that I come from my hilltop. I come from my experience. My experience in supporting the Kepner-Tregoe process since 1996 is that it is an incredibly practical and incredibly relevant set of life skills that have demonstrably assisted me in my career. It assists, the ability to use these processes assists me every single day in my business life and also in my private life. What I got from the foundation workshop for ITIL was an understanding of the terms as if it were a dictionary. So I understand what they mean by stuff. Whereas with the KT process, I will come away with a different way of approaching things that are coming along, different ways to approach situations, different ways to find the root causes, different ways to make decisions, different ways to plan stuff in the future. And so if we measure the success of a training intervention by the behavioral difference that it is a result of attendance, then for me, the attendance of a foundation workshop didn't actually change my behavior. It changed my understanding, but it didn't change my behavior. For the KT stuff, my behavior was changed. I think that's the answer from my hilltop.
No, and that's thanks for the answer, Steve. Thanks also for the person asking the question. I was fortunate also to attend both an ITIL foundation course. It was also version 2, and I attended the KT foundation course delivered by Steve. And indeed, it's a behavioral changing aspect. That's also, I think, the difference between ITIL and KT, where KT is really about how do you do things, and ITIL foundation is about just knowing and understanding what the processes are. There's a follow-up question, a further question, a question regarding the KT implementation. I think you mentioned it, but in your experience, Steve, how big should a business be to fully benefit from using Kepner-Tregoe?
Oh, now, how big should a business be in order to benefit from Kepner? That really depends on what you're hoping to achieve. I will argue that if you are a startup company and there are 3 of you in a startup staring across the table at each other, and you all have a really good way of setting your strategy, which is actually situation appraisal and then decision analysis. That you have a good way of issue resolution, you have a good way of expressing and your value to the world. Even though there's only 3 of you, if you were all excellent at the application of clear thinking processes, which are a management tool rather than something that's exclusive for techies, then you're going to have a better. There was a quote that's absolute gold dust for KT from a previous CEO of General Motors, who said that there were 3 things that were important in his life. One of them was his father, one of them was the time that he spent in the military, and one of them was the Kepner-Tregoe processes. Now, okay, he got to be the CEO of General Motors. Bob, I think his name's Bob Klutz. Cutts. Anyway, I should know the name off the top of my head, and I don't. And so that kind of frames clear thinking processes, not in terms of IT, but in terms of clear thinking in management. And it is the management of tickets, which is where KT is coming from, but it can equally and adequately and superbly be applied to setting the strategy of very large organizations. And indeed, one of my colleagues was speaking this morning to a group of us in the office about setting the strategy for a life sciences company, for helping them set it for the next 2 years for a particular range of products. So how big does an organization need to be? It can be 1, 2, or 3 people. The effect is multiplied by the number of people who are involved. And I also think that the time is right for this product in the marketplace in terms of economic cycles. So if we were living in a time of rampant growth, nobody needs to pay attention to the efficiency and effectiveness of an organization because they can just hire more people. But in a time of gentle recession, and it has to be gentle recession, the kind of recession that we had in 2009 is not a place for clear thinking. It's a place for reducing the number of people, cutting heads, cutting departments, 100% effective people being affected in particular groups. The time is right now for clear thinking in organizations irrespective of their size. And so I don't think that there is a minimum size. I do think that the more people there are involved, the more effect it has, because arguably the more people that are involved in an organization, the more chances there are for poor quality, efficiency, and effectiveness. And I do think the time is right.
Thank you for that, Steve. I have 2 more questions. The next one is, where can we get the trainer schedule, cost, etc.? I'll take that one.
That's for you, Arian.
So we are currently planning a TTT workshop in, it looks like it's going to be Miami, and that one is most likely still going to happen this year. We might also run more trainer workshops in other regions. This year we ran 3 in total, 1 in Europe, 1 in North America, and 1 in Latin America. So please also talk to your ITpreneurs account manager or regional support team to find out more. But it looks like we're still planning one for Miami end of this year. The last question that I have is the following. I think problem management often seems cumbersome due to the lack of information and tool support, as in a knowledge management, data to information to knowledge and wisdom. How much is how do problem management and tool support covered in the foundation training? How to do problem management and tool support?
How to do problem management is not covered in the training. That is out of scope for the 2-day workshop. How to tool problem management is also not covered in the training. That is out of scope for the 2-day workshop. The 2-day workshop is just about the introduction to the 4 key processes inside the KT core thinking processes. So it's only about situation appraisal in an IT environment, problem analysis in an IT environment, decision analysis, and potential problem analysis in an IT environment. We do not go into how to deploy problem management nor what tools there are available. However, the good news is that ServiceNow are about to release a version of ServiceNow that supports the KT situation appraisal and problem analysis thought processes out the box. Now, many ServiceNow customers use a hosted solution, and they will be able to take advantage of that functionality as soon as it's released. Those customers who are hosting ServiceNow themselves typically end up being 2 or 3 releases behind, some years behind, and they're really, I just feel sorry for them. But ServiceNow are about to support the KT process out the box. And they're the first and arguably the biggest they're the first customer supplier to support KT out of the box, and they're arguably one of the biggest tool support organizations at the moment.
And the problem management extension, Steve, what does that cover?
The problem management extension covers the deep and abidingly beautiful process of problem analysis. So we go into the problem analysis process which is covered in half a day in the 2-day introduction. We spend 2 whole days on problem management, and we cover an advanced topic called distinctions and changes, startup problems, multiple startup problems, fluctuating startup problems. I'm doing this from memory. One more, yes, one-of-a-kind problems, and then we drill on the verbal use of the KT process, so that at the end of that 2-day problem management extension, those individuals are really, really good at the problem analysis part of the processes.
Perfect. That's all the questions we have so far. So if there are any further follow-up questions, please feel free to send me an email, and I will work with Steve to get the questions answered. I will send also to all of you a copy of the slide deck that was distributed, that was presented today, and then also we will make available a link of the recorded webinar, so you can listen back to Steve's explanation today. Thank you, Steve, very much for taking the time to walk us through the Kepner-Tregoe process in relationship to ITIL, Incident Management, Problem Management specifically. And thanks all the attendees for joining in today. I hope this is useful for you. As a final follow-up, I mean, both KT and ITpreneurs will be at the Fusion event in North America. So if you also are planning to come there and would like to know more about KT or the partnership that ITpreneurs has with Kepner-Tregoe, feel free to contact me. I will be there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So would like to discuss it further with you in greater detail. Thanks for now, and have a great day today. Bye-bye.